What makes good companies good and good companies ultimately great and great companies even greater? And how do we use that knowledge to invest? This is Tonight. I'm Bruce Whitfield, and tonight I'm speaking to Vusi Thembekwayo, who's a global business speaker. He's a judge on South Africa's version of Dragon's Den, and he's been working with the best-selling author Jim Collins's Good to Great methodology to find local companies that fit those criteria. Is this Jim Collins sanctioned, or are you just doing it quietly?
No, very quietly.
Very quietly.
Yeah. Jim doesn't put anything out there officially. So very quietly, we're friends of the firm, the Good to Great firm. We collaborate on a few things together, but very distant relationship, and we like it that way.
Okay, so the Good to Great book is what, 10 years old?
About, yeah.
And it told us what made good companies great, and
That's right.
and the secrets of good to great companies. And Jim Collins that's probably the best book he's ever written. Frankly, he's done other stuff since then. What are you doing in South Africa then, using those methodologies to see whether or not we've got companies that meet those criteria?
It's interesting. One of the things around this question around how old the book is, and it's almost a question that you allude to, albeit not explicitly asked, is how far behind as a country we are in terms of our adjudication of business and processes.
I'm getting there.
Sorry, I beg your pardon. So, Good to Great, as you say, is 10 years old. A lot of people, of course, after 2008, 2009 happened, wrote articles like Good to Great to Gone, because some of the companies he cited about just weren't around after that period. So certainly we referenced some of the methodology they used. We had to adjust some of the methodology to the locality and the nuances of the markets where we operate and the spaces where we operate and trade. But ultimately, we seek to answer a simple question. If you are a long-term player and an investor and you're wanting to get into business and into the continent, what kind of businesses would you be looking at? And what are the habits, behaviors, cultures, traditions, processes, systems that those businesses have that you should look to and go, this is the kind of business I should be doing business with?
Okay, so are you looking Pan-African?
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay, so you give me some good to great Pan-African businesses.
Well, let's start in South Africa first. I think Shoprite is probably a great story.
Well, okay, but let's do something else here. Here's two companies with great South African heritage.
Right.
Pick n Pay and Shoprite, roughly the same age.
Right.
One went to Australia twice and came back and is now woken up to the fact that there's an African continent with plenty of opportunity.
That's right.
And one is focused entirely on the African continent.
It's interesting. It's a mistake there are a number of other companies now making in the retail space who are moving more to Australia than the rest of Africa.
So Woolies is making a mistake?
I think so. I would even hazard a guess and say Mr. Price is also doing the wrong thing.
Well, let's get there in a moment. Sorry, Woolies and Pick n Pay and Shoprite.
So 2004, Pick n Pay and Shoprite have run about the same revenues, around 30 billion rand. You fast forward about 9 years, 2013, Shoprite shoots up to about 96 billion and Pick n Pay is at about 60. Of course, around 2014, Shoprite breaches the 100 billion rand a year mark. I mean, 100 billion rand a year almost doesn't sound realistic, isn't it? If you make 100 billion a year, you're making 10 billion a month, 2.5 billion a week, 500 million a day, 50 million a trading hour. It's incredible the amount of volumes that these guys do. But I don't think that looking at that tells the story. For me, what was fascinating about the Shoprite exercise was understanding the history of that business. 1978, thereabout, been led by the same guy since the late 70s, early 80s. To this day, by the way, still essentially the same
He's the
guy.
longest serving chief executive of a listed company, 30 years.
It's extraordinary, Bruce, if you think about the kind of changes he's had to make. So here's a guy who...
We're talking about Whitey Basson.
Right. So you're operating in Cape Town, Western Cape. In fact, you're operating in Stellenbosch and a bit of Cape Town, Milnerton. Then you go Cape Town, white suburb. Then you go Western Cape, white suburb. Then you go South Africa, white suburb. The 90s come and you go, maybe I should get into the township. So you do that very successfully. In 91, the largest store by turnover in the Shoprite group was in Goodwood, Cape Town.
Okay.
White suburb. The largest store by Shoprite, by turnover in Shoprite Group today is in Thohoyandou. Second largest, Diepsloot. Diepsloot is 6 times the turnover of their Soweto store. It's extraordinary. But what they had to do was they had to make a couple of brave decisions at the time. So you remember, in the early 90s, this is back in your time, I wasn't around then. But
no, come on.
In the early 90s, there was this thing where, the war between the IFP and the ANC.
Yeah.
It really wasn't a war. It was what it was, and let's call it what it was. It was political genocide.
Yeah.
But it was between the IFP and the ANC. And when the IFP went into the townships, marched and killed people, they also destroyed infrastructure, which meant they burned stores. So the message written very tacitly in the boardrooms of white business was, whatever you want to do to grow your business, don't go into the townships. There's these crazy Afrikaners from Cape Town. Again, we're going to go to the township, but that's where we're going to... And they go and open up businesses there. And some of them were burnt. Their first store... That
was a good Hollywood Afrikaans accent.
Yeah. Their first Deduza store got burnt, yeah. But the guys had then actually made a success of it, right? And they've ridden on the back of that success. So a lot of people who try to understand this good to great story, it's one thing to understand the numbers, but I find very interesting the story behind the numbers. And the fact that actually even the CEO himself has to walk into the boardroom and sometimes argue and fight with his own board and argue a point with very little evidence but the entrepreneurial bravado of believing he can do it. Yeah. It's extraordinary.
And he's taken that model and he's made it Pan-African.
Oh,
and there's Lusaka, there's stores in Nigeria, probably the biggest footprint for ShopRite outside of South Africa on the African continent.
Their Makoko store, sorry Bruce, yeah. Their Makoko store outside.
Where's Makoko?
Makoko is a slum. It's the only slum built completely on water. An extraordinary story. I've been there a couple of times. So it's outside Lake Victoria in Lagos, and the slum area flooded about 100 years ago. The people didn't leave. They rebuilt their wooden shacks and suspended them on 2 meter stilts water. It's an extraordinary place. So people say black people are scared of water. Never been to Makoko. Amazing place. So their Makoko store does something like 10 times the volume of maize meal that all of South Africa does. All of South Africa, a single store. It's extraordinary.
And then on the other side of it, there's more Moa Chandon sold in Lusaka and in Lagos than there are in a handful of South African stores as well.
I think it's extraordinary. But again, what it speaks to, which is this inherent theme that you keep hearing about, is how in the new way and the new world of doing business, the world you and I knew, the rules we assumed, the playground as it were, no longer operates. Malcolm Gladwell was right about the 10,000 hours. What he didn't tell you was 10,000 hours only works if the rules don't change. But of course the rules have changed now, right?
And they keep changing, and Whitey Person stays ahead, where Pick n Pay is desperately trying to catch up.
They've got a look. To Pick n Pay's credit, they've got a great poker face on, and I think they've got a good trump card, and the trump card is data. You know, this go shopping thing that Pick n Pay's got going, and the amount of data they're amassing using that tool, if they know how to leverage the data correctly.
But that's the trick, and very few people are using big data effectively. They're hoping that the Smart Shopper card will do that.
Yeah.
I want to just touch on, let's look at Truworths and Mr. Price.
So, yeah. It's an interesting story, right? Truworths and Mr. Price, kind of about the same type of businesses, operate similar models in similar markets, selling essentially similar commodities.
T-shirts, shorts, jeans.
That's it. And for a long time, they seem to sort of track each other on performance until, and this is the big until, Mr. Price hits the clicker on the button. And the clicker on the button Mr. Price hits is that if you continually price yourself as a premium place type of retailer, then you're going to attract premium money. But if you move more into the discount pricing market and you keep some of that premium pricing and then you diversify what you offer, so you get into home and the rest of it, you really begin to grow your business. I mean, it's extraordinary for me that Mr. Price's entire Africa expansion program is completely on balance sheet funded. They have zero debt to fund their Africa strategy. It's absolutely extraordinary, but it speaks to how much cash they've got sitting in that balance sheet. And if you look more recently now at the numbers, I think Truworths is still at about 40-something rand per share, and Mr. Price has now gone over 100.
No, absolutely.
It's amazing.
In the 150s. I mean, Mr. Price is an extraordinary story. It's been a perpetual outperformer for its 28, 29-year history, and Truworths is coming distinctly off the boil. They're getting a Belgian in to run Truworths.
Let's see.
Talk about poker faces.
Yeah, let's see. I believe there's a lot of value in getting the right CEO in, but I sitting on several boards myself can tell you that there's a lot more value in getting the right executive around the CEO. Yeah. Whether or not that will be the case, we remain to see. Remember too, Bruce, that the retail environment in this country is a highly incestuous environment. All the executives know each other. If you move from one company to another, you have a track record. People kind of know who you are. So the top 50 executives who can operate these businesses are kind of all have their fingers full. The reason I say let's see is not because I'm incredulous around whether or not he will achieve what he needs to achieve. I'm wanting to see where he's going to get the talent to turn the business around.
And I think that's the problem that Pick n Pay is facing as well. Here we've got Mr. Ex-Tesco, Mr. Richard Brasher, terribly talented, terribly gifted, but you need the support around you to make it work. Last one, very quickly. Discovery versus Liberty. Liberty's got more of an Africa strategy than Discovery does. Discovery's got a UK China strategy.
What's interesting about Discovery, and certainly when we looked at them as a business, this is what stuck out for us, is Discovery has a lot more of what we call a deliberate point strategy. So they do less territories, but when they do a territory, they penetrate it really, really well. They grow strong brand proliferation and they send their top talent into those territories. So The US happened. Okay, everybody makes a mistake. You don't get everything perfect.
It was only R1 billion. But the point is, unlike other guys, they cut loose very quickly. Old Mutual blew billions, and Sage died in America.
So Discovery lives by two very interesting philosophies, and this is one of the second things we found in our research. The philosophies these businesses are driven by, because there comes a point where your business is so big, it doesn't matter how talented you are and how robust your systems are, you can't control every moving part. And what really drives it then is the philosophy, the culture of the business, right? But Discovery has two very interesting philosophies. The first one is something called lead by the business case, which is interesting because I, having been in corporate myself, can tell you it's a serious cancer where you lead by the business person and who has what position and who's in whose boys club and did we play golf together, rather than what does the business case in, does it hold? That's the first. The second is, they say, fail fast, fail first, fail forward. So in other words, don't get married to businesses and business processes. If you are going to fail, make a mistake, do it quickly, get out.
Contrast that with me then. The inventor of the unit trust in South Africa, Donnie Gordon, at Liberty 50 years ago. And Liberty has been the also-ran in the South African insurance sector.
Absolutely. But to Liberty's credit, they are much more of a mature business. I think you have to understand the machinery that is Liberty. Liberty is a Titanic times 10. So for it
it's going to sink 10 times.
Well, no. That's not what I mean. What I'm speaking about is for that machinery to change direction, there are a lot more moving parts because of the size of their book and the size of that business. You speak about Donald Gordon and the past of that business. I would argue that a part of the challenge Liberty's had more recently is precisely that it has not been true to the roots that founded it. That this highly entrepreneurial flair and spirit that drove that business to be what it is no longer the case, right? So, and you see it. You see it in the caliber of person employed, the caliber of management, their own past and history. There's a reason. There's a reason F&B will take top talent and send it to the rest of Africa and bring it back.
In 30 seconds.
Right.
Do we have great companies?
We have phenomenal companies in this country. But for every one phenomenal, we have about 10 bad ones, which is what makes the phenomenal, is that they are what they are, right?
Vusi Thembekwayo. We must leave it there. Vusi Thembekwayo is the rock star of public speaking. He is also on several company boards and he does lots of interesting research in his personal capacity as well. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed tonight's show. There'll be more tonight, tomorrow. Till then, good night.